Your Honor, first I want to say I'm sorry. I did a horrible, unimaginable thing, and I live with remorse and regret. I am a great mom. I've lived a law-abiding life, and I do deserve a lengthy sentence. I just hope you use some discretion and go with the lower
The call
end.
came without
Thank you.
warning. No flashing sirens, no urgent knock. Just a quiet moment in an ordinary morning that would split a life clean in two. It began in a parking lot. A woman steps out of her car, coffee in hand, preparing for another routine day, unaware that the past, buried for nearly 3 decades, has finally caught up with her. There are no handcuffs, no accusations, just calm voices and a request that sounds harmless enough. "Can you come with us for a moment?" She agrees. And with that decision, a 27-year-old secret begins to surface. Welcome back to Fearful Crime, the place where forgotten cases resurface, hidden truths are exposed, and silence finally breaks. Tonight's story is not about a chase, not about a manhunt, not about a mystery that unraveled overnight. It's about patience, about time, and about a secret so heavy that it waited nearly 3 decades to be spoken aloud. On a quiet morning in early September, New York State Police approach a 52-year-old woman named Keri Mazzuca outside a Dunkin' Donuts in Guilderland, New York. To her, it feels like a minor traffic matter, maybe a question, maybe a warning. They're polite, calm, almost friendly. She has no idea she's walking into a conversation that will expose one of the most disturbing crimes Albany has ever known. The officers don't rush, they don't accuse, they simply ask her to come along. "There's something we'd like to talk to you about." She agrees. Inside the unmarked vehicle, small talk fills the silence. Weather, traffic, work schedules. The tone is so casual it almost feels comforting, disarming even. But beneath that calm is purpose. Because for nearly 27 years, investigators have carried a case that never left their minds. A case without a name, a case without a face. A case involving a newborn child left in a public park. September 7, 1997. Park workers arrived early that morning to begin their routine maintenance in Washington Park, Albany. What they discovered instead would stay with them forever. Hidden among the greenery was the body of an infant. No identification. No explanation. Only fragments of cloth and signs of deliberate harm. The child would later be given a name, Baby Moses, a name chosen not by family but by officers who refused to let the child remain forgotten. For years, the case went cold. No witnesses came forward. No missing child reports matched. No answers. Until science caught up with silence. Back in the present, Keri sits inside the police station. The tone shifts, still calm but deliberate. The officers explain they're revisiting an old case using modern investigative tools. Genetic genealogy, family DNA, techniques that didn't exist when the case began. They tell her that DNA linked to the remains from 1997 has pointed in her direction, not as an accusation but as a lead. She listens carefully, nods. She appears confused but cooperative. She's asked about her family, her children, her past. Nothing seems out of place at first. She mentions having 2 children, grown now, healthy. No missing relatives, no secrets she's aware of. But then the questions narrow. "Were you ever pregnant besides those 2 times?" "No." "Anyone in your family who was?" "No." The room grows quieter. Then they show her photographs, not graphic but unmistakable. Her reaction is immediate. Shock, disbelief, a hand over her mouth. She whispers that it's horrifying, that it makes her sick. And for a moment it seems genuine. But investigators have been here before. They know that denial often comes before collapse. They tell her the truth. This baby was not only abandoned, the child had been deliberately harmed. The air in the room changes. What Keri doesn't realize yet is that this conversation is not about if she's involved. It's about how much she's willing to admit. Because while she speaks, investigators are quietly confirming something they've suspected for years. That the woman sitting in front of them, calm, cooperative, seemingly ordinary, may be the only person who knows exactly what happened that night in 1997. And before this day is over, she will say something she can never take back. The room is quiet now. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the kind that presses in on you, forcing your thoughts to get louder. The kind that makes every breath feel exposed. Keri sits across from the investigators, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting just slightly too often. The tone hasn't changed, Still calm, still professional. But something beneath it has shifted. The warmth is thinning. The patience is narrowing. This is no longer a casual conversation. This is a test. They explain that the case they're reopening dates back nearly 3 decades, that the technology didn't exist back then to solve it, that now it does, and that sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with sirens. It arrives quietly, through family trees and DNA strands. Keri nods along. She says she understands, but understanding isn't the same as acceptance. The investigator leans forward slightly. "Help us understand your life back then," he says. "Where were you living in the late 90s? She answers easily. She had recently moved. She was working. She was young. She was trying to find her footing. Everything sounds reasonable. Then comes the pause, the deliberate one. "Were you ever pregnant during that time?" The question lands softly, but its weight is enormous. She hesitates just for a fraction of a second. Then she shakes her head. No. The detective doesn't challenge her. He simply continues. "Were there ever any complications? Any pregnancies that ended unexpectedly?" Again, no. He nods, making a small note on the paper in front of him. And then he asks something different. "Did anyone in your family ever talk about a baby that never came home?" Her brow furrows. No. Still calm, still cooperative. But now there's something else beneath the surface. A tension that wasn't there before. The detective leans back slightly. "Let me explain why we're asking," he says. He tells her about the infant found in Washington Park, about the early morning discovery, about the unanswered questions, about how the case never left the department's conscience. He tells her that the child had no name, no record, no explanation. Only evidence. And that evidence, decades later, led them here. Keri's breathing changes. Her hands tighten together. She stares at the table as if trying to disappear into it. When he explains that genetic genealogy connected her family line to the infant, her face drains of color. That's not possible," she whispers. But her voice betrays her. The investigator doesn't argue. He doesn't accuse. He simply lets the silence do the work. "Sometimes," he says gently, "people survive by pushing memories so far away they stop feeling real." She swallows hard. Then comes the question that shifts everything. "Is there anything you're not telling us?" She shakes her head quickly. Too quickly. No, there isn't. But the room knows better. And so do the investigators. They explain that this isn't about punishment. Not yet. It's about the truth. About understanding what happened to a child who never had a chance to grow up. They show her a map. Washington Park. They point to the exact spot. Her hand flies to her mouth. "Oh my God." Her voice cracks. She says she's been there before. Walked those paths. Seen the flowers. She never imagined. Her sentence trails off. The detective watches her carefully. "This child didn't die by accident," he says quietly. The words hang in the air. She blinks rapidly. I don't know anything about that," she whispers. But her breathing is shallow now. Her shoulders tense. The walls are closing in. Then comes the part that changes everything. They tell her the child had been intentionally harmed. That there were signs of deliberate actions taken after death. That this wasn't negligence. It was intentional. She recoils. Her face twists in disbelief, horror, confusion. That's awful," she says. I can't even." Her voice breaks. But the detective watches closely. Because this isn't shock alone. It's recognition. They ask her again, gently, about pregnancies. She hesitates. This time longer. And then, almost too quietly to hear, she says something that wasn't there before. I was young." The room stills. She swallows. "I didn't know what to do." It's not a confession. Not yet, but it's the first crack, the first fracture in a story that's been sealed for 27 years. The detective doesn't push, not yet. Instead, he leans back and lets the silence stretch. Because silence, he knows, is where truth begins to surface. And as the minutes pass, something changes in her expression. The fear gives way to something heavier. Guilt, regret, and the growing realization that the past she buried may finally be standing right in front of her. The silence lingers longer than anyone in the room expects. It's not uncomfortable, it's heavy. The kind of quiet that presses against the chest and forces memories to surface whether you're ready or not. Keri stares at the tabletop. Her fingers locked together so tightly her knuckles have gone pale. For the first time since the interview began, she doesn't look confused. She looks tired. The detective doesn't rush her. He's seen this moment before. The space between denial and truth when the mind starts replaying memories it spent years trying to bury. "You said you were young," he says calmly. "How young were you?" She swallows. "Mid-20s. And where were you living at the time?" She hesitates again, then answers. "In Albany. The same city. The same year. The same place where a newborn was found alone in a park. The coincidence hangs in the air like smoke." She rubs her hands together almost as if trying to warm them. I didn't plan anything," she murmurs. "I didn't even think it was possible." The detective leans forward just slightly. "Did you know you were pregnant?" A long pause. "I didn't want to believe it." There it is. Not a confession, but a door cracking open. She explains that her life at the time felt unstable. Work was uncertain. Relationships were messy. She tells him she ignored the signs, that she told herself it was stress, weight gain, anything but pregnancy. And when reality finally made itself impossible to ignore, she says she panicked. "I didn't tell anyone," she admits. "Not my family, not friends, no one." The detective nods slowly. "Why not?" She exhales sharply, like she's been holding her breath for years. "I was ashamed." That word hangs in the room, shame. It's heavy, ancient, powerful enough to make people do unthinkable things. The detective keeps his voice even. "What happened after that?" She hesitates again, longer this time. Her eyes glass over. "I was alone," she says. "I didn't know what to do." She explains that the birth happened suddenly, that there was no plan, no help, no preparation, just fear. And then she stops talking. The silence returns, thicker now. He lets it sit. Finally, he asks the question that's been circling the room since the beginning. "Was the baby alive?" Her lips part. She nods. Barely. The detective doesn't react, not outwardly. His voice remains steady, professional. "And what happened next?" Her breathing becomes uneven. "I panicked," she says again, as if the word might somehow soften what comes next. I didn't know what to do." The room feels smaller now. Every sound, a shifting chair, the hum of fluorescent lights, and feels amplified. She looks up at him, eyes glassy. "I didn't want anyone to find out." The sentence lands like a crack of thunder. The detective doesn't interrupt. He lets her speak. "I thought if no one knew, then it would just go away." Her voice trembles. "And I know that sounds horrible." He nods once. "I need you to be clear with me," he says gently. "What happened to the baby?" She swallows hard. "I held it," she says quietly. "I didn't know what else to do." The room seems to hold its breath. "And then?" Her voice drops to almost a whisper. "I covered its face." She stops, stares at the floor. The words don't come easily, but they come. "I didn't think, I just wanted it to stop." The detective exhales slowly, steadying himself. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't accuse. He simply asks, "Was the baby alive when you did that?" She nods. "Once?" That single movement lands heavier than any scream ever could. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. This is the moment the case truly changes. Not because of evidence, but because of truth. The detective finally speaks again, carefully. "You understand what you're saying, right?" She nods again, tears streaking down her face now. "I know." She wipes her face with her sleeve, her voice barely audible. "I think about it all the time." The room feels different now, colder, heavier. The story she's carried in silence for decades has finally been spoken aloud. And with that truth, everything shifts. Because now the investigators know this isn't just a cold case anymore. It's a confession. But there's still more they need to understand. Because one question remains unanswered. What happened next? The room feels colder now. Not because of the air, but because the truth has weight. And once it's spoken, it settles into every corner, impossible to ignore. The detective doesn't rush her. He lets the silence stretch again because now it's doing the work for him. "What happened after?" he asks quietly. Keri swallows hard. Her voice trembles, but she keeps talking. "I panicked," she says. "I didn't know what to do. I just wanted it to go away." The words are simple, almost childlike, but the meaning behind them is anything but. She explains that she wrapped the baby, trying not to look, trying not to think. That she convinced herself she could just leave it somewhere. That someone else would find it. That someone else would take over. "I didn't think about consequences," she says. I just wanted it to be over. The detective listens carefully. He's not there to judge. Not yet. He's there to understand the sequence. The truth lives in details. She describes driving without a plan, no destination, just movement. She says she didn't even realize where she was going until she arrived. Washington Park. A place filled with families, laughter, life, the cruel contrast to what she was carrying. Her voice cracks when she says it. I didn't choose it for a reason, it was just there. The detective nods slowly. And what happened then? She hesitates again. There's a long pause. And then she admits that fear took over. Fear of being identified, fear of consequences, fear of losing everything she thought she still had. I didn't want anyone to know it was me. She says she panicked again. That's when she made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She tried to destroy the evidence. The room goes still. The detective doesn't ask how, not yet. Instead, he asks something else. After that, what did you do? She looks up, eyes empty. I went home. The simplicity of it is staggering. She tells him she cleaned up, went on with her life, went to work, talked to people, smiled, laughed, pretended nothing had happened. And somehow and impossibly the world kept moving. Days became weeks, weeks became years, and the secret stayed buried. Until now. The detective studies her carefully. Did you ever think you'd be caught? She shakes her head. No, I thought it was over. But it wasn't. Because science doesn't forget, and neither does the truth. He explains how advancements in genetic genealogy reopened the case, how distant relatives unknowingly submitted DNA that quietly built a family tree leading straight to her. She listens in stunned silence. I didn't know, she whispers. That's the point, he replies. You weren't supposed to. The room grows heavy again. She presses her palms into her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she says weakly. But the detective's voice is firm now. Intent doesn't erase outcome. She nods, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, she says the words that have haunted her for decades. I killed my baby. The sentence hangs in the air, raw, irreversible. The detective doesn't react, he lets it exist. Because this is the moment the case stops being a mystery and becomes a reckoning. He tells her they'll need to document everything. That there will be legal consequences, that she'll have to face what comes next. She nods again, quietly, almost resigned. But before the interview ends, there's one more question. The one that's been waiting all along. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? She looks up slowly. I was ashamed, she says, and I was scared. Her voice breaks. And then too much time passed. Outside the room, the machinery of justice begins to turn. Because now the truth has a name, and the silence that protected it for 27 years has finally been broken. The room is quiet again, but this time the silence feels different. Not heavy with tension, heavy with inevitability. The detective closes his notebook slowly, deliberately. The questions have done their job. The truth has surfaced, not in a burst, but in fragments, piece by piece until it could no longer be denied. He looks at her not with anger, not with sympathy, but with finality. We're going to take a break, he says. We'll talk again shortly. She nods. She doesn't ask why. She doesn't ask what comes next. She already knows. Outside that room, the gears of the system begin to turn. Investigators step away to document what has just been said. Every admission, every detail, every contradiction resolved. The confession doesn't stand alone. It's supported by years of quiet work, forensic genealogy, and evidence that waited patiently for science to catch up. This wasn't a sudden arrest. It was the conclusion of a long, methodical process, and now there was no going back. When the door opens again, she's no longer being spoken to as a witness. She's being treated as a suspect. Her posture changes, her voice softens. The reality settles in. She asks the question she's been holding back since the moment she sat down. So, what happens now? The answer is careful, measured, honest. There will be charges. She nods slowly, absorbing the weight of that statement. She asks if she's going to be taken into custody immediately. The response is complicated. Not yet. There are procedures, paperwork, legal steps that must be followed. For now, she's allowed to leave. The words sound almost unreal, even to her. She stands, gathers her things, and walks out of the station the same way she walked in. But nothing is the same anymore. In the days that follow, investigators continue building the case. Warrants are filed. Evidence is reviewed. Statements are transcribed. And then quietly, without spectacle, she is arrested. The charge, manslaughter. Decades after the crime itself. The news doesn't break immediately. There's no flashing headline at first, just court filings, legal notices. A name resurfacing after years of anonymity. When the story finally becomes public, the reaction is swift and divided. Some people ask how someone could carry such a secret for so long. Others ask how it took so long for justice to arrive. But for those closest to the case, the truth is simpler. Time didn't erase the crime. It only delayed its reckoning. In court, the facts are laid bare. The timeline. The evidence. The confession. The judge listens as prosecutors describe a child who never had a chance, and a life shaped by a choice made in fear. The defense does not argue innocence. They speak instead of immaturity, of panic, of a life forever defined by one moment. But accountability does not fade with age. When the sentence is read, the courtroom is silent. The chapter that began in secrecy ends in public record. A name, a crime, a consequence. Years earlier, that child was given a name by strangers who refused to let him be forgotten. Now, decades later, that name is spoken again, not in mystery but in memory. The case that once haunted a city finally has an ending. But the weight of it, the grief, the questions, the loss remains. Because some stories don't end with justice, they end with reflection, and a reminder that time may pass, but truth waits. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect, and subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be remembered.